Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Amir Erez, the W.A. McGriff Professor of Management and Ph.D. Coordinator at the Department of Management, Warrington College of Business, University of Florida, to today's podcast episode. It's an honor to have him join us for what promises to be an insightful and inspiring conversation. Dr. Amir holds a PhD and MS from the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. He earned his BA in Business Administration and Philosophy as well as MA in Philosophy from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Dr. Amir's research explores how positive psychological factors such as mood and personality shape cognitive processes, motivation, and behavior in the workplace. He also examined the impact of negative workplace interactions, including rudeness and disrespect, on individual performance and decision making. His work has been featured in leading academic journals, including the Journal of Applied Psychology, Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Academy of Management Journal, Personal Psychology, Personality and Individual Differences, Human Performance, and the Journal of Organization Behavior. In this episode, Dr. Amir Erez shares valuable insights from his research on the ripple effect of rudeness. So without further delay, let's welcome Dr. Amir Erez to the podcast. Dr. Amir, it's an honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for inviting me to your podcast. It's a pleasure meeting you, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to chat with you,
Thank you.
about my research on rudeness.
Thank you, Dr. Amir. Dr. Amir, what inspired you to explore how workplace positivity and negativity impact performance and decision making? And could you start by summarizing the main findings of your research on the effect of rudeness on task performance and helpfulness?
So originally, I was not a researcher of negative workplace behavior. I was actually a researcher of positive mood and positive personality and how they influence motivation, cognition, and workplace performance. And I was invited to give a talk at the University of Southern California on the power of being positive. And after my talk, I went to lunch with one of the faculty members. Her name is Christine Porat. And she told me about her research on rudeness and incivility. And at the time, this research showed that when people frequently experience rude events or incivility, they become emotionally exhausted, they burn out, which has some implications for performance. But there was no direct investigation on performance. And what she said is that she believes that actually even one incident of incivility or rudeness could affect people's performance. And I told her that I don't really buy it. And the reason that I said that was because rudeness, these are mild negative behaviors. These are not major harassment or abuse. These are mild things like impolite behavior, small insults about you or your reference group, offensive comments, name calling, eye rolling, ignoring you, things like that. So relatively, these are minor things, and we, as human beings, we are pretty resilient. Psychology shows, for many years, that we are pretty resilient in dealing with minor negative events that happen to us, which is very good because otherwise all of us will walk around being depressed all the time. So, I didn't think that it will have much of an effect on people's performance. And by the way, these are very, very common events that happen. There is an estimation now that 50% of employees experience rudeness at work on a weekly basis. Almost all employees experience it at some point. And there is even a recent survey by the Society of Human Resources Management, SHARP, that US workforce face 190 million acts of incivility every day. So these are very common events, but they're very small still. So I thought that people are going to be resilient. Yeah, they're going to get insulted and so on, it's going to influence their mood maybe, shortly, but it's not going to affect their performance, especially if they're doing very important work, like physicians, for example. They need to treat patients. So it shouldn't affect them. And this is how many managers and many physicians think about it also. So I thought in the same way. So, but she thought like that it's going to affect people. So I said, well, this is an empirical question. We probably should like investigate it, like and see like who is right. And in the last 20 some years, like in all of my research, I just see like how she was right, actually. And even very, very small events that you don't think will have much of an effect on people, like especially if it's one event, like not an accumulated events, like that it wouldn't like that it has tremendous effect on people. So the first study that we conducted that was published in the Academy of Management journal. And what we did is we asked people like to come to the lab. We told them that this is a study about like how personality influences cognitive functioning. And they come to the lab and they fill out like some personality questionnaire. And after 6 minutes, we have a confederate who is part of the research team comes and says, "Oh, I'm really sorry that I'm late. My class was just released now. Like, can I still participate in the study?" And in both the control, like, and the treatment conditions, like the experimenter is telling me, "No, you're too late." But in the root condition, he also like berates them. He tells them things like what is it with you? Like people like you, like at this university, like you arrive late, like you're irresponsible. I worked at other universities, like, and you have a lot to be desired, like at students at this kind of university. Like so, like, and he says that actually, like to the participants, like after the Confederate leaves. So it's pretty mild, but it's unpleasant. Like, and it is like if you identify with your reference group, like it's kind of a little bit insulting. And then they need to perform like a task. And the task is solving anagrams. Anagrams are words that you scramble and you need to put them back together. So it's kind of like a moderately difficult cognitive task. And another task was what can you do with a brick? And you have to come up with uses for a brick. And what we found that, first of all, like those who experience rudeness, they perform much worse on the anagram solving. Like the second thing is they come up with many less uses, like for a brick, and their uses are like not very creative. People are actually very creative in this task. They come up with uses like hanging it up on a museum walls and calling it abstract art, like selling it on eBay and decorating it as a pet and giving it to a child to play with. But people in the root condition, they come up with only mundane solutions, like building a house, building a bridge, and so on. So these are some of the things that we found in terms of performance. And by the way, like one of the other things that we found was that they come up not only with mundane solution, they also come up with like aggressive solution, like hitting the experimenter on the head, sinking a body in a river. And one of the anagram was demure, which was scrambled, and you have to find that it's demure. And many more people in the rudeness condition came actually with murder, which is a misspelling. So like this was like the first study that we conducted. And we became curious and said, like, what if it's like we do some other manipulations of rudeness and we find the same effect, like in 3 studies. Then we tested it also with witnesses, and we found like that you don't experience this, you just witness rudeness, and we find exactly the same effects. Then I conducted some studies with some colleagues in Israel, like that were interested in customer service representatives. And we found the same effect with people who are actually, these were not students, these were customer service representatives. And they made mistakes, like in how they record information, for example. Like, and in many, many other ways, they made mistakes, like they did not perform as well. And then one of the studies that I conducted to try to understand what's going on here, like I looked at attention. And what we found that people like that experience rudeness, they miss information that is in the center of their visual field. It's like for 5 to 10 seconds. Something that is really in the middle of the visual field. Like, and if they experience rudeness, they miss this information. So I was talking with a colleague of mine, Peter Bamberger, who actually I know that you interviewed on your podcast also. And I told him about this finding, and I said to him, like, this is very disturbing because think about it. Like, let's say like that you're in a surgery and the surgeon is being rude to the anesthesiologist, and the anesthesiologist is missing something that in his or her like a center of the visual field. They need to monitor what's going on in the like with the patient, and it's not good if they miss information. So we decided like to do a study in a medical setting. And we recruited to work with us, like the head of the chair of the NICU department, the neonatal ICU. And we conducted a study with physicians and nurses. And like we set up a scenario where they had to diagnose like an infant what a disease he has. And now this was a medical simulation, so it wasn't done with real patients, but like it's a sophisticated medical mannequin that you can actually conduct surgery on. Like you can see like what is like the respiratory, like what is the blood pressure, like, and many many other things. So like they experienced rudeness like in this simulation, and it had devastating effect on their performance. They did not diagnose the disease, like they did not diagnose several other things that happened like during like the procedure. They made mistakes like in conducting the procedure. They did not resuscitate appropriately. They did not ventilate appropriately. They gave the wrong medications. They ordered the wrong tests and so on. Just from a small like rudeness that they experienced. And this is very, very disturbing because we know now that medical errors is the third leading cause of death like globally, like after heart attack and cancer. And the estimation is that about 250,000 people a year die like from medical error just in the United States. So we conducted several other studies. In the second study, like we had a patient like being rude to the team, and it influenced them throughout the day. So they didn't treat one patient like when they treated 5 patients. Again, these are all medical mannequins with different, like the simulations of different diseases and so on. Then I conducted one study here, like at the University of Florida, with one of my colleagues who is a chief anesthesiologist of the liver transplant unit. And we found here like that like residents like that experience or even just witness rudeness, they completely missed the diagnosis. Like they stuck to a wrong diagnosis and they didn't miss a diagnosis that would, and the patient almost died like during the surgery and so on. So we have an accumulated evidence that it has devastating effects on performance. Now, in terms of helpfulness, it also affects helpfulness. So what I did with Christine, like we had the experimenter knock down a jar full of pencils, and we looked at how many pencils, like if they at all helped pick up the pencils and how many pencils. So first of all, like people in the root condition did not help much. And if they did help, they picked up only 1 or 2 pencils. Like so they just help symbolically, not really help. And we conducted like many other studies that show like that it has very, very strong effects on helpfulness and how you work with other people. Like so it influenced team functioning. So this is in short, like what we found in many, many studies. So again, like Christine was right, like it has devastating effect, even if it's one incident and even if it's a pretty small incident.
Very insightful. Professor, your study explores different forms of rudeness, instigated by an authority figure, delivered by a third party, and imagined rudeness. What motivated you to examine these different types?
So like after we conducted the first study, like I thought and Christine thought that also like maybe it's like it has such a strong effect on people's performance is because it's coming from like an authority figure, like from like the experimenter. Like so maybe that's the reason that it happens. So we were very curious to see like what happens like if somebody else like is being rude to you. So the second study that we set up, like it was a complete stranger. Like we asked like students to come to the lab and we gave them their own room number. And we put like a small sign on the door, like saying the experiment is actually going to take place in room such and such. But it was a small sign, like there were other signs on the door. So everybody misses it and they get in and they say, hey, I came to the experiment. And the person who is sitting there in the control condition is telling, in the non-root condition is telling them, it's actually not here, it's in room such and such. But in the root condition, he tells them, what, can't you read? No, but you prefer to get in and to disturb me. I'm not a secretary. I'm a busy professor. Get out of here. And then they go to the room where the experiment is conducted, and we find exactly the same effects. We conducted it like in another study, we conducted it just with witnesses. So you don't even experience it, you just observe like other people experience rudeness. And we find exactly the same effects. And even when it's like in some other studies, we tested how mild should it be like to have an effect. And we found that even if you just imagine it, or even if we just prime it in some way, like so you're not even aware that you experience rudeness, like it's just on your mind. It has the same effect. So so, so we basically concluded like that any incident of rudeness, experience, witness, imagine, it has pretty bad effects on your cognition and your functioning.
Professor Amir, your research shows that rudeness can reduce both routine and creative task performance. Could you explain why rudeness has this negative impact across such different types of tasks?
So there are two explanations for that, and both of them are seems to be valid explanations. So like the first thing is it affects your cognition. Like, and especially like the core of cognition, and I think we'll talk about it later. Like it affects your working memory, which is the core of the cognitive system. And almost any type of performance, except for maybe very, very routine or habitual performance and very simple performance, you need your cognitive system. Like you need to think about the stuff that you're doing. And we have now very, very strong evidence that it affects your cognitive system. So this is one explanation. Another explanation is that what rudeness is doing, it increases your level of arousal, especially negative arousal. So you have intense negative emotions when you experience rudeness or even witness rudeness. And we know for a long time in psychology that what arousal is doing, it narrows you. Like so, like it narrows your perceptions. It's narrow the way that you're thinking. Like it basically you focus like very like because arousal like the goal of arousal is to make us like like it it, it causes us like to focus on very very narrow things like in order to survive. Like you lose all the peripheral vision of yours, like connections to other things. Like you focus on surviving. So this is the goal of arousal. And like so, when rudeness is increasing your arousal, it narrows you. And like for things like creativity, for example, you need to be broad. You need to see many association between things. You need to explore like a different solution, a novel solution. Um, and like it's impossible like to do that like when you have a high arousal. We also find in one of our studies that it increases anchoring. So you're stuck, like for example, on the first diagnosis, and you don't move like to a different diagnosis. So again, it narrows you. You don't consider other things. And in almost every type of complex performance, and definitely in creativity, you need to be broad. So what the arousal is doing, like that is caused by rudeness, is doing the opposite. And this is why it affects like creativity and complex performance, and like to a great extent, even routine performance.
Rudeness also decreases helpfulness, as shown in your studies. How does rudeness affect individuals' willingness to offer help, even when they are not directly impacted by the rude behavior?
So in our most recent study, what we looked at how people are functioning in teams. And we found again like the same effects that we found when we work with individuals, we found that it affects like teams functioning. And one of the reasons that it happens is because it affects your social value orientation. So people like could be pro-social in the orientation, or individualistic or selfish, or they could be even competitive and hostile to other people. And like most people are kind of in the range of like pro-social like orientation. Like so the majority of people are like actually pro-social. And what we found like across multiple studies that when you experience rudeness, like it shifts you from like being pro-social in your orientation to be more selfish and even like sometimes hostile. And the reason is because like what rudeness is, it's basically it's a threat. It's a social threat, and this is why it also increases like your level of arousal. Like your heart rate is increasing, like your blood pressure is increasing. Like you're basically preparing for flight or fight. Like so, like you basically um, uh, focus on yourself. Like, and when you focus on yourself, you don't focus on other people. You become less pro-social. So you're becoming less helpful. Like you share less information with other people. Like you share like less of your work with other people, and so on. And we found it like again, like one of the devastating effects that it has is on medical teams. So one of the things that we found, like they don't share information with each other. They don't share information and they don't share their work with each other. And this is why like they're making mistakes because of that, because they don't get the right information.
Professor, you examine both rudeness instigated by an authority figure and rudeness delivered by a third party. How do these two sources of rudeness differ in their effect on performance and helpfulness?
So this is one of the things that is really, really surprising about that. And there are many, many things that are very surprising, starting with what I started describing, like that I was surprised that it has an effect at all. And one of the things that you would expect that it will have like different effects, like on different people, like by the way that it is delivered. So you think that supervisors will have much more of an effect, like than customers, for example, or coworkers, or peers, or like in the case of patients, like the family of the patients, like so you would think like that like authority figures will have much more of an effect. And we are not finding that. Like what we're finding is like almost identical effects. So it doesn't matter like if it's an authority figure or like a coworker or a customer or a peer. Like we find almost identical effects. even if you just witness it. You would expect like that if you experience it, it will have much, much stronger effects on your cognition, on your performance, on your helpfulness. But that's not what we're finding. What we're finding is that if you witness it, it has an exact same effect. So if you look at the effect sizes, they're almost identical, which is very, very like like surprising. But this is what we're finding.
You also look at imaging rudeness in your experiments. What was the rationale for including this? And how does imagining rudeness influence cognitive processes compared to actual rudeness?
So again, even if you just like imagine it, like we find like very, very, very similar effects. And uh, there were two things like that were interesting here. Like one, we wanted to see like how weak again the effect, like the manipulation is, like to have an effect. And again, we find like that even with very weak manipulations, like just imagining like that you experience rude events, it has the same effects. Um, we also just primed it, like, and priming it is like that people are not even aware, like that, like they are encountering rudeness. Like how do, like the way that we primed it, we ask people like to form sentences like we gave them 5 words and asked them like to form like a sentence, a grammatically correct sentence, like I am out of 4 of the words. Like so we gave them 5 words and we said like from the 4 words. So um like half of the like we gave them 30 sentences, like, and in the control condition all of the sentences like were like neutral. Like for example, oranges are from Florida. Uh, but in the rudeness condition, half of the sentences, so 15 of them, like were related to rudeness. She interrupted him, and he insulted her, like things like that. So they came up like with these sentences, and like so, like they just encounter rudeness. It was on their minds, and we find the exact same effects. So this is one thing. The other thing is that like many of the effects of rudeness over time, like people think about it. Like it doesn't disappear after you experience it. Like so sometimes like when I talked with people, sometimes people like describe like they like somebody was rude to them and they thought about it for a day or they thought about it for a week. Sometimes like they thought about it like for a month. Like, and every time that they think about it, like it could have the same effect. So we know like that when people like are recalling an event, it actually like has the same, like many times it has the same effect as experiencing the event. Like in terms of the brain, like it is like in the same area of the brain. Like in imagining it, it's not exactly in the same area of the brain as memory, but there is some overlap. So like what we wanted to see if this could be an explanation why like it has such an effect over time on people. Like so like they imagine it and like they basically experience it again. And one of the things that we found very, very strong effects on our cognitive system. So like this is something like that is like it's very, very important to understand that because, again, many times managers, physicians, professionals, again, they think, well, like, yeah, it may affect you, but it is something that you need to get over. Yeah, you get insulted, get over this, like, and keep functioning. Like, so, like, it shouldn't reduce your motivation. And in my studies, I found that it doesn't necessarily reduce your motivation. For example, physicians, they're highly motivated to treat the patient. They don't want to make mistakes. So it may not influence their motivation, but it influences the cognitive system. And this is not something that you have control over. And specifically, we have multiple studies now that show that it influences your working memory. And working memory is the core of the cognitive system. It's called the workbench, like the workbench of the cognitive system. So it influences planning future actions, like initiating retrieval and decision processes, integrating information coming into the system, transfer information to long-term memory, like retrieving information from long-term memory. Almost any type of high order cognitive capabilities are dependent on working memory, reading and listening comprehension, language comprehension, following directions, vocabulary learning, note taking, writing, reasoning, general fluid intelligence, which is like solving novel problems. So almost anything that you can think of is dependent on working memory. Like think about it in terms of like making a diagnosis, for example. Like you need to manage, like you need to find solutions. Like you need to think like in a novel way about things. Like you need to be able like to manage like your goals, like and to plan. All these things are things that are dependent on working memory. And we have very, very strong um, like findings like that it directly influence your working memory and your ability to manage goals like in working memory. So like and even things like priming like rudeness. So it's just on your mind with the sentences influence working memory. And it also explains why you don't perform well like on the anagrams, on the brick, and all these other things that we found.
Professor, how should managers and leaders adjust their behavior to maintain performance and helpfulness in their teams?
So the first thing like that people need to know is that it has tremendous effects. Like again, like you speak with many managers like and other professionals, and they don't know like what the effects that you have, and they may even think, well, I'm being tough on people, like I'm being rude to them so they can perform like better and so on. Like people always like give the example like of Steve Jobs who was rude to people, like and people like did like and people function, but actually like the major finding that we have and many other researchers now find it that like it really affects your cognitive system. So it's something that you don't have control over and you're not functioning well, like you're making mistakes like when you're treating patients and so on. Like so like it doesn't help you. Like the reason that Steve Jobs was so successful was despite the fact that he was rude, not because he was rude. And like this is something like that people just need to learn and to know. And like or, what organizations can do is they can actually like make it known like to their managers, like that when while being rude, like and uncivil like to their employees and to other people, they are like damaging their productivity, they're damaging their performance. And not only that, in one of our studies, we found that it spreads. So it doesn't stay only with like the people who are affected with it or even just with witnesses. It spread to other people in the organization. So it can have tremendous effect on like people ability like to think and to function and to perform well. And one of the I think things like your podcast can help very much like in this like because this spreads like the word like that this is just not a good thing.
Professor, my last question. Are there any aspect of the relationship between rudeness, task performance, and helpfulness that you feel require further exploration in further studies?
Yes, so I think like that what we need the next stage of this research is we need to get to the physiology of it. Like we need to see how it influences. We have evidence like that it influence um that like people report like that it is causing like intense emotions and so on. But we really need to get to the physiology of it, like to measure how it influences arousal, how it influences blood pressure, how it influences heart rate and so on. And we strongly believe that it will affect that. And the ultimate thing is to see how it influences our brains. So, and I think like that, like this will also be like very important, like to show to managers, like that it affects our brains. Like it's not something that we have control over. Like we can't get over it. It affects like how we think. Like, and we have strong evidence that it affects how we think, but we also need to explore how it influences our brain and how exactly like it influences our thinking. So I really think that we need to get to the physiology of it. The other thing is, like, we have a strong suspicion that it influenced society overall. So one of my former students, who is now a professor at Indiana University, like Jay Gale, did his dissertation of how it influenced social dilemmas, which is like things like even climate change, like saving water and so on. And what he found that rudeness affect like this kind of like things also. Like so, like the effect of rudeness, which is increasing and it's very, very prevalent now, like may have an effect on society, like wide phenomenon, like and maybe this is also an area that we need to explore more.
Listeners, as we come to the end of today's insightful conversation, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Amir Erez for joining us and sharing his expertise. His research on the impact of workplace dynamics, especially the ripple effect of rudeness, provides invaluable perspectives for anyone looking to foster a more positive and productive work environment. Dr. Erez, your work has been instrumental in shaping our understanding of how seemingly small interactions can have profound consequences, and we are grateful for the opportunity to learn from you today. Thank you once again, Dr. Amir, for joining us.
Thank you very much.